I always believed my marriage was unshakable. Gabriel and I had spent 10 years together, wrapped in a routine that, while occasionally mundane, provided us with comfort and security. That all shifted the day when I decided to learn how to swim. I had always wanted to learn swim, but never found the time. Finally, I signed up at the local sports club and met Joshua, the new swim instructor, and, to my surprise, my husband's nephew. Joshua was everything Gabriel wasn't. Joshua, the swim instructor with a smile so bright it could light up a pool hall. Young, athletic, with dazzling, mesmerizing blue eyes. At first glance, I felt a special connection with him. I convinced myself it was just admiration for his skill in the water and his teaching. The first few classes were ordinary enough, yet I couldn't help but notice how his swimsuit fit his toned physique just right. It was natural to find attractive men, I told myself. It had no deeper significance. However, my need for our poolside encounters grew stronger as the weeks went by. During one of our flotation technique sessions, Joshua leaned in closer than normal to help me straighten up. The sensation of his strong hands on my waist and back sent thrills down my spine. Even though it was a light touch, we were both startled for a second by the sudden burst of electricity that had passed through our bodies. The frequency of the accidents increased from that point forward. Legs brushing when one swims. A hand that took a second longer than necessary to help me out of the pool. Glances that lasted longer than appropriate. Little by little, a passion I hadn't felt in years began to burn within me. Class sizes had grown too large. I requested private lessons with Joshua, claiming that I wanted to progress more quickly. We started our nightly sessions when the club was almost deserted, and he consented without hesitation. The first of those classes stands out in my mind. The night air was chilly, but the water was warm. Joshua was teaching me to refine my crawl technique. As he led me across the pool, our bodies remained fused. I turned around to confront him with a question once, and our faces were almost touching. I can't tell if he or I was the one who stepped forward initially. Our lips met in a sudden, passionate way in love, as if centuries of restraint had disappeared. His hands explored my body underwater. Elements I had long since forgotten were reawakened as his hands explored my entire aquatic body. We intensified our kiss. More than just swimming techniques, Joshua taught me a lot that night. Even though we knew it was improper, we investigated our emotions with a sense of almost desperate eagerness. Although I am powerless to stop. Every touch, suppressed sound, and tremor of pleasure were magnified by the water. I felt a sinking feeling of remorse as we climbed out of the pool, exhausted but satisfied. Although I felt more alive than before, I had cheated on my husband, who had promised to love me forever. Emotions were all over the place throughout the following few days. On the one hand, staring into Gabriel's eyes brought a pang of guilt. On the flip side, Joshua kept popping into my head. His palms and all of his love. How he had affected my emotions. I tried to convince myself that the way he made me feel was a mistake, a one-time slip. But I was only fooling myself. Until we got in the water during our second individual class, I was unable to control my excitement. Joshua was the one who stepped up to the plate this time, pressing himself against the pool's edge and planting a passionate kiss on my neck that left me gasping for air. As his skilled fingers explored every side of the love garden, they uncovered pleasure areas I never knew existed. I said, "This is wrong." "Sure, I am aware." He replied without pausing, acknowledging that it is indeed quite satisfying, and he was right. As I savored the experience, I felt fully alive. Lost in the beauty of the moment, time stood still with each tender touch, gentle kiss, and graceful movement. Joshua and I were fully present, our connection deepening with every step. As we moved in harmony on the lake's serene waters, the world around us melted away, leaving only the two of us, immersed in a beautiful, passionate waltz. We started to meet more frequently and with more risk. The pool was no longer sufficient for us. From the locker rooms to the sauna and even Joshua's office, we checked it all out. Our clandestine sessions were even more exciting because of the constant fear of being detected. Yet the weight of shame increased with the passing of time. Seeing Gabriel upon my return home was like having a neon sign that read in "Feel" spelled out above my head. He didn't suspect anything, of course. He was pleased that I had discovered an activity that I was so passionate about. If only he understood the actual depth of that passion. My narrative is not yet over. Please consider subscribing to the channel, thank you. And now back to the story. One night, after a very intense session with Joshua, I returned home to find Gabriel waiting for me with a romantic supper. He had made my favorite food and arranged candles throughout the living room. I felt like the world's worst person. "I love you, Victoria," he told me as we ate dinner. "I'm extremely proud of you and how hard you work at swimming. Joshua calls you his best student." I nearly choked on my wine. Did Joshua tell her about me? What may he have said to her? Panic struck me for a second until I noticed Gabriel was still smiling, oblivious to my fears. "Thank you, honey," I managed to respond. "Joshua is an exceptional teacher." That night, while Gabriel slept soundly alongside me, I couldn't help but compare him to his nephew. Gabriel was a good man, diligent and responsible, and he loved me unconditionally. Joshua, on the other hand, symbolized passion, adventure, and the forbidden. I was divided between the comfort of my marriage and the thrill of my affair. Days progressed into weeks, and then into months. My double life started to take its toll. I lived in continual terror of being discovered. I started making reasons to spend more time at the club, which increased my guilt. Joshua seems to be fighting with his own issues. Sometimes, after our rendezvous, I would catch him looking at me with a mix of want and regret. We knew we were doing something wrong, yet we couldn't seem to stop. Joshua broke the stillness one afternoon while we were resting in the locker room after a particularly strenuous workout. "Victoria, this cannot carry on like this," he replied, his voice full of emotion. "We are hurting those who do not deserve it." I knew he was correct, but the prospect of terminating our affair was causing me physical pain. "I know," I responded with tears in my eyes, "but I'm not sure how to stop it." We were silent for a long time, each engaged in our own thoughts. Finally, we made the decision we knew was coming. We needed to end our connection. That night, we said our goodbyes with one final passionate kiss. We knew it would be our last. It was bittersweet, full of all the longing and regret we had accumulated over months. Returning to normalcy proved more difficult than I had anticipated. Every time I saw Gabriel, I was filled with feelings of remorse and longing. Longing not only for Joshua, but also for the woman I became while with him, passionate, bold, and free. I chose to put all of that energy into my marriage. I began planned surprise dates and became more kind and attentive to Gabriel. He saw the difference and welcomed it with enthusiasm, believing that I had just rekindled the flame of our early years together. However, my mind kept returning to Joshua. I remembered our rendezvous at the pool, the way his hands were searching to me, how he made me feel alive and desirable. It was a bittersweet recollection. A combination of pleasure and shame dogged me throughout my most vulnerable moments. One night, as Gabriel and I were watching a movie on the couch, I got an idea. "Honey," I tried to sound nonchalant. "What do you think about setting up a jacuzzi on the patio?" Gabriel glanced at me with amazement. "A jacuzzi? Well, it could be fascinating. Where did the idea come from?" I shrugged, pretending indifference. I thought it would be good to unwind after a busy day. Plus, I could do some swimming exercises there. I noticed a glimmer of joy in her eyes. "I like the sound of that," he whispered, drawing me closer to him. "We may arrange our own private swimming lessons." I felt a shudder run down my spine. If only he knew. But I just smiled and nodded. "Exactly," I said, kissing him softly. As Gabriel began to talk eagerly about the technical aspects of installing a jacuzzi, I became lost in contemplation. I realized this offer was an attempt to preserve the memory of my aquatic exploits with Joshua. It was my method of retaining a small part of that forbidden passion. But this time, inside the boundaries of my marriage. I wondered if I could ever forget Joshua, if I could ever stop comparing Gabriel to him. A part of me hoped I would, that the memories would fade over time, and I'd be able to return to being the devoted, happy wife I was. Another portion, however, valued the recollections. "It's exciting. The passion." Joshua had instilled in me a sense of aliveness. As Gabriel continued to speak, I moved closer to him, absorbing his familiar aroma. He was my rock, my constant. the man I'd decided to spend my life with. And a part of me would always crave the thrill of the forbidden. I knew I'd made the correct decision when I ended my romance with Joshua. Yes, the hot tub would serve as a reminder, but it would also provide an opportunity for a fresh start. A method to reintroduce some of that passion into my marriage. To rekindle the spark Joshua had lit. But this time, I was with the man I had pledged to love and respect. As Gabriel hugged me tight, I closed my eyes and had one final thought about Joshua, about our covert encounters, regarding how he had made me feel. Then, gently, I let those ideas dissipate, like ripples in a pool. The future was unknown. However, I was resolved to swim in calmer waters from now on. With Gabriel by my side, perhaps I can strike a balance between the security of familiar love and the excitement of passion. And who knows? Maybe our own hot tub sessions will surprise me. As the film came to a close, I understood that my own story of love, betrayal, and redemption was coming to an end. However, unlike the movies, real life does not have a clear ending. Every day represents a new opportunity to write the next story. When I looked at Gabriel, who was now resting quietly alongside me, I felt a wave of affection. Yes, I had made mistakes, eaten the forbidden fruit, and danced perilously close to the edge of infidelity. But now I was back in the arms of the man I had sworn to love through sickness and health, fidelity and temptation. The memory of Joshua will always be with me, like an invisible scar on my heart. Scars, however, serve as a reminder that we have survived, learnt, and grown. And I'd grown. I was no longer the Victoria who had entered that pool months ago, innocent and dissatisfied with her marital life. I was a stronger Victoria, more aware of her desires and limitations. As I softly stroked Gabriel's hair, I thought about all the couples in similar situations. How many people battle daily with temptation? How many succumb? How many people manage to resist? I understood there were no simple answers, and that each narrative was unique and intricate. The sound of rain gently tapping against the window jolted me out of my thoughts. I stood up slowly so as not to startle Gabriel and walked over to peek outside. Raindrops trickled down the glass, generating little rivulets that resembled ripples in a lake. I smiled wistfully, but the stinging agony that had previously accompanied those recollections was gone. I returned to the couch and nestled up next to Gabriel, who mumbled something nonsensical in his sleep before wrapping his arm around me. At that moment, I was filled with gratitude. Despite my flaws and weaknesses, I still had this. A home. A man who loved me wholeheartedly.